When thinking of our favourite anime characters, many names come up. Almost too many. It's a testament to the medium as a whole. Though, when we narrow down that list to who we think is the most intelligent, only a handful of names come up. What's smart about them? What makes it so? Is it their ability to draw pieces of information together and create a new, novel solution? Maybe it's how they use their wide array of knowledge in order to achieve their aims. Perhaps it's their intelligence quotient or their IQ. I've always found intelligence tests troubling, as I believe that there's many types of intelligence. Although I do agree that there is a general type of intelligence, but I don't think the whole discussion is that simple. One categorization of intelligence I am partial to is by Howard Gardner in 1983, who pretty much coined 8 different types of intelligence. I probably quite like this one because it made me feel smarter than I am, because I found one that I'm pretty good at, so it made me feel, I guess, less dumb. These consist of linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. And each of these can correspond to different professions. This in mind, it illustrates a particular theory. Some people are just better in different environments. Yeah, I know this seems kind of trivial, but it does provide an avenue to sort of figure out where we fit best and how we can maximize our gifts and reach our potential. What I find fascinating is when we relate measures of intelligence to autism and the tendencies that they have. In many cases, those who are diagnosed to be in the autism spectrum have typically range from below average to average intelligence than the normal patient population. However, in some cases though, autism can be associated with extremely high levels of intellect and downright genius. Autism derives from the Greek word autos, which means self, implying that autistic are self-absorbed in their own little private world. This isn't to say that there's a causal link between the two, i.e. autism meaning that you are intelligent or vice versa. More so that those who happen to be really intelligent are actually also on the autism spectrum too. This is commonly portrayed in the media with the mad scientist stereotype.
I am a mad scientist!
In fact, these characters are actually based on real people who lived in our world, and these people achieved amazing feats and are really bright. Albert Einstein himself had Asperger syndrome, and I believe so does Elon Musk. And I think their names kind of speak for themselves. AppliedBehavioralAnalysis.com states that MRI investigations comparing the brains of ASD patients to neurotypical control groups unearth any number of differences in the activity within those areas commonly used for social communication and restricted and repetitive behaviors. In the case of autistic savants, those areas are particularly repurposed to perform other feats of intelligence. In short, the part of the brain responsible for social activity and repeated procedural behaviors is different to the standard patient population, or in other words, normal people. For savants, a person affected with a mental disability, such as autism, who exhibits exceptional skill or brilliance in a particular field. Those brains are focused and used for something completely different other than social activity. If you've watched The Queen's Gambit, the main character is a perfect example of a chess savant. Amongst those savants on the autism spectrum, some can also have Asperger syndrome. Asperger syndrome, also known as Aspergers, is a neurodevelopmental disorder with restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior and interests. Studies have shown that those with Asperger syndrome to be averagely intelligent at a minimum compared to those in the normal population, and very intelligent genius level on the higher end. It has also been known to have features of the autism spectrum disorder, non-verbal learning disabilities, and ADHD. There are quite a few differences between classic autism and Asperger's, which I won't fully dive into here, but they are pretty closely related. Now, there is one particularly intelligent anime character which I feel can fit into this bracket, and that is L from Death Note. When I was younger, I thought he was just a bit quirky, a bit funny, and I thought he only had those traits just to make him memorable, which it was. But with time and doing my degree in psychology, I started to understand how well some of these characters were written, because they were actually based on real phenomena, real things in our world. Probably one of the reasons why I like doing the videos that I do on this channel. And obviously mental health conditions aren't really excluded from what writers can write about in their manga, in their art, in their books, whatever it may be in fiction. In this video, we will break down L's tendencies and behaviors to see how he could actually have Asperger syndrome. We will use aspects from his social interactions, language, and more. We will look into moments in the series that could suggest that L has Asperger syndrome, and see how these things could suggest that his savant-like genius can be attributed to his autism and the Aspergology of L.
Motivate to motivate, spit till I suffocate, very quick to agitate, concentrate till I rate, I'm irate, in a state, my confidence is a trait, success is my motherfucking fate.
I am L.
This is him?
He's nothing like I thought he'd be.
In a social context, the main observable behaviors that could indicate that someone may have Asperger syndrome is found in their interactions with others, comprehension of expressions and gestures, and the consistency of eye contact. In a lot of ways, Aspergers can have limited social interactions and can be inappropriate. When they are in a social interaction, there can be an incongruence between what is being said and how it's being said, and the expression made when it is given. Something funny or emotionally provocative can be said without much expression to actually accompany it. While they are in a social interaction, they find difficulty in maintaining eye contact and sustaining it. So generally, eye contact is pretty low in some cases. Studies suggest that the reason for this low eye contact is because they find it stressful or uncomfortable to sustain it. The neurological approach actually supports this too, as it implies that the lack of eye contact is a way of reducing the overstimulation that one gets from eye contact. And this overstimulation is in a particular region of the brain, which only people with Asperger's will kind of feel or understand. Potentially, as a consequence of the above points, Asperger's can typically not have that many friends or be socially isolated, but it's of their own volition. These are based on the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders, or the DSM-5. Throughout Death Note, L has really been depicted as pretty socially awkward in a lot of his behaviors. His social awkwardness is prevalent in him being less intuitive of social graces. An example of this was when L met the task force for the first time, and instead of introducing himself and letting them know that they shouldn't give away their name so easily, he shocks them by imitating a gun to indicate that they would be dead if he was Kira.
Bang!
What the hell was that?
I suppose he wanted to make a point, but given the already uncomfortability of the situation, and it was the first impression, it felt slightly left field. Another symptom of social awkwardness is unusually tense focus on things like mathematical or logical things. Clearly, L is hyper-focused on the Kira case to the point where sometimes he wouldn't sleep. In general, L comes across as very different from most people, and I guess that's due to his mannerism. One of these being his eye contact. In the show, L either struggles to make eye contact or either stares deep, deadpan into the other character's eyes in a pretty awkward way.
I want to tell you I'm L.
It's kind of like he's a zombie in a way, as he somewhat looks like he's looking deep into your soul. Not just L's eye contact, but his facial expressions as well. Most of the time, L's face bears a pretty deadpan, neutral expression with not much visible emotion. In the same vein, he might not be able to read emotions very well, evident in the scene with Aizawa. In this scene, Aizawa is enraged that L tested him, and even though it was for the advancement of the Kira case, Aizawa couldn't see past this and was pretty upset. Instead of comforting him and using his emotional intelligence to calm the situation, which came across as pretty sarky to Aizawa.
Hate him and his way of doing things!
That's too bad, because I like you, Aizawa.
I also hate the way you've always got to have the last word. You insult me, now you say something like that? That's it, I'm out of here.
Some studies have indicated that although some Aspergers can be very intelligent in some areas, like the more logical, rational side of things, they may lack it in regards to their ability to read emotion and act accordingly, sometimes making them come across as cold or even rude. It's not their fault, nor does it mean that they are actually cold. It just means that they have trouble and difficulty comprehending the emotions of others. I think part of the reason is that people with Asperger's take things literally, so they could respond in the same way. I think one of the clearer signs that L has Asperger's syndrome is in his friendships, or lack thereof. During the series, we learned that before L worked with Light and Task Force, his only company was Watari, his supplier/butler. Other than him, he was pretty much socially isolated and had no friends. Instead of hanging out and being social, he would be working on cases. He was the world's best after all. This, of course, all changed when he met Light Yagami. It's actually quite sad because we know that from watching the series that deep down, L always knew that Light was Kira. Kira being the mass murderer that L is mindlessly obsessing over catching. To some degree, it shows a level of idealism not really spoken about when people talk about L's character. The contradiction here being that he so desperately wanted to believe that Light wasn't Kira versus what he knows deep down and what he believes to really be true. L wanted his friendship with Light just as much as he wanted to catch Kira. It's upsetting because it shows how much he valued Light as a person. L considered Light to be
The first friend that I have ever had.
And I think this is telling for many reasons. I don't know about you guys, but people generally make friends with people they feel are similar to them and they share common interests with. From this viewpoint, we can understand why Light was considered to be Elle's first friend for two reasons. One being their common shared goal of collectively catching and arresting Kira, and the other their shared level of intellect, that being of two geniuses, which is similarity. And this is sort of evident in the fact that these guys got the highest scores in the entrance exams to get into the university, the best university in Japan. So there's that. If we ponder the idea, Light was never really shown to have any friends of his own, other than the superficial one. From that alone, we could probably deduce that Light probably had no real friends for the same reason. If you watch my video on Light's psychopathy, you would know that there might be a few different reasons for it. All in all, it can seem that Elle's Aspergic-like mannerisms and Savant-like intelligence could have resulted from his social isolation and lack of friendship. I believe the reasons why he considered Light to be his true first friend or his only friends only served to solidify this position. I think it's quite sad in a way because there was a little bit of a cognitive dissonance between how he wanted to be with Light versus what he knew deep down, and I think it's probably one of the more tragic elements of Death Note, but nonetheless it's pretty sad. But yeah, it's a shame. I wonder what would have happened if Light never was Kira. Maybe it would have been completely different. It would have been cool to see what it was like. I guess the best way to see that was in the Yotsuba arc, where they got pretty close, but even then, El always thought that Light was Kira, regardless of whether he lost the memories or not, so.
You're able to commit these murders without being present, but I don't mind waiting a little bit longer.
You can answer all of my questions when I catch you.
Let's meet again soon, Kira.
This was my favourite section to research, as it actually sparked my inspiration to make this video. When looking into the main language and speech quirks of those with Aspergers, I found a variety of aspects which bear a striking resemblance to El and mirror some of his behaviours. They mainly boil down to two major facets, so one being what is being said, and the second being how it's being said, or rather how language gets interpreted. Firstly, those with Asperger's tend to use very complicated and sophisticated vocabulary and just generally pretty advanced words, in addition to saying them with a pretty modulated tone of voice. The primary explanation that I found for this is that using a variety of tones takes up quite a large cognitive load for those with Asperger's, just due to their general lack of understanding of social functions. I guess this could be attributed to the neurological approach that I mentioned earlier in the video, sort of detailing the unique brain structure of those with Asperger's. As a consequence, speech is delivered by what those that don't have Asperger's to be considered as monotone. However, what is actually being said tends to be of a much higher quality in respect to the language choice itself. It seems that this is a result of the independent interest of language itself, leading to a deeper understanding of the language's lexicon. I think many of us can learn from this, as the benefits of a deeper vocabulary are insurmountable. See, I can say cool stuff like that. The second area is the type of things being said and the interpretation of others' speech. It is widely known that those with Asperger's have the proclivity to speak about their own self-interest or speak about themselves. I believe this too stems from their unique neurology. By no means does this make them selfish people. In fact, those with Asperger's have actually gone beyond their condition and superseded their condition through their awareness, and they make a conscious effort to learn and balance it out. Here's a clip of my friend Harry, who has Asperger's, and how he dealt with this sort of situation and how he feels about it.
Never a specific moment, but I remember gradually coming to the conclusion that I don't want to be treated a specific way, so others won't want to be treated like that either. And if they don't want to be treated like that, that must be because they must feel the same thing I do when I'm treated like that. So therefore they have feelings.
Given what we know about Asperger's and their language tendencies, it might be obvious now why they take a lot of things literally. This is especially problematic with things like sarcasm and colloquial linguistic expressions, as well as slang. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. When sarcasm is used, it involves a drastic change in tone, and linguistic expressions and colloquialisms have an entirely different meaning of their own. You guys in London that use slang as well, you kind of know what I'm talking about.
That was bad jokes, blood. Hey, your crabs are safe, fam. They're so bait, fam. You ain't my chicken nuggets, innit? Oi, allow it. That joke was bad dry, fam.
And really and truly, it's like comparing it to learning a new language. I mean, if you try to imagine yourself learning a new language, it's kind of like what someone with Asperger's feels like when they're trying to learn all these expressions and all these things that maybe for us would make sense, but for them, maybe it wouldn't. From these explanations, you guys might have already drawn some comparisons to L, the most clear-cut being L's constant monotonicity.
I'll give you this strawberry if you keep it a secret, okay?
In almost every scene in Death Note where L speaks, it's with the same tone. The only exceptions being when he is shocked or surprised. I mean, it's so prevalent that it's actually iconic. In a way, L is, to some extent, recognized for his mode of speech. If not to others, he definitely is to me, and I think it leaves us with some hilarious moments.
I could actually fall for you.
Branching off this is the actual things that he says.
Without experience, seeing as you've helped the police solve a number of cases in the past, now you're showing an interest in the Kira case. I'm impressed by your abilities and your sense of justice.
This shows a high-level grasp of the English language and his ability to articulate his ideas in a clear and effective manner, which is made especially more impressive due to the lack of vocal range that he speaks in. So he's able to convey a very deep and succinct message without having the benefits of being able to express it with a variety of tones and ways of speech. Furthermore, much of what he actually speaks about is in regard to the Kira case, and which we could technically classify that as speaking in a self-interested way. We know that this is actually a self-interested topic, as it does stem from L's obsession to the Kira case and catching Kira in order to solve the case, which I believe is partly egoic reasons, which is evident when he gets depressed when he can't actually find evidence that Light is Kira.
Actually, I'm depressed. Depressed? What for? Well, truthfully, all this time I thought that you were Kira, and my entire case hinged on that fact. I guess I just can't get past the fact that my deduction was wrong.
For the time being, anyway. However, the argument could be made that there is a comorbidity between the situation and what L was talking about and his self-interest. The main purpose of L in Death Note is for him to be a foil to Light, a rival, someone to battle with. And when we see L on screen, he is either with the task force or discussing elements in relation to the Kira case, because I suppose that's his job after all. Thus, it's very difficult to tell that he is talking in a self-interested manner all the time. And like we said, it could be him just simply doing his job. We don't really see much of when L is actually just having normal conversations with others. And as we said, it doesn't really happen often. Even when he's asking questions to Light in the cafe, it's basically a subtle mode of interrogation to determine whether or not he could be Kira. Based on this, I think it's very hard for me to make an actual judgment because we don't have that much to go off. Purely from my opinion, I do think that he does speak in a self-interested way, solely from what we see on the show, but I am open to being challenged on this.
The piece of cake as long as you agree to leave me and Light alone.
Even if I leave you two alone, I'm still gonna be watching on surveillance cameras, so it wouldn't make any difference.
You pervert! Could you stop it with your creepy hobby?
You can call me whatever you like. Last chance for cake.
I'd say that this is the most fun part of the video because we'll be covering a wide assortment of Aspergic qualities and look at some of L's behaviors in comparison. I'll begin with a theme that has come up quite frequently in the video, and that is obsession. Those with Asperger syndrome tend to have a very detailed memory for specific things, and obviously topics that they're interested in, as we stated before, which of course can border onto the realm of unhealthy fixation. Their memory can be so powerful, in fact, that it could be accountable for some of their deficits. It seems that the trade-off for the excellent declarative memory is the inability to navigate through some social situations. Here's an example of a man called James who has Asperger's with a photographic memory for trains and plants.
Look at that steam it's creating, James. Listen. Wow.
Whether it's plants, bus timetables or train codes, James is able to call on his photographic memory.
He's got a good retention for facts and figures. Like he could tell you all the names of the steam trains and a lot of the flowers and plants as well.
Though not all types of Asperger's are the same, in some unique cases of high-functioning autism, they're those with savant-like qualities. Autistic savants are children and adults who have an autism spectrum disorder and who display remarkable abilities or skills in one or several domains. In simple terms, they are pretty gifted in very specific areas. The movie Rain Man is based on a man called Tim Peake who actually memorized 12,000 books, including the Bible, and was an expert on 15 different subject areas, including geography, music, literature, and sports. Amazingly, Kim could read 2 pages simultaneously with one eye corresponding to each page, and in 8 seconds he could memorize 2 pages. Pretty crazy. And this intense focus may be attributed to some elements of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is common amongst those with Asperger's. Amongst the unique quirks are unusual body language and posturing. The general consensus seems to be that people with Asperger's take things so literally that their body language can appear outer-worldly. It could be a byproduct of other people's body language, meaning that they act in a way independent of others, thus coming across as awkward or unnatural. Another fascinating yet isolated point is their preference for individual sports over team sports. I suppose this too is based on their difficulty with social communication. All of this in mind, let's look at the parallels with Elle. Straight off the bat, I wouldn't hesitate to call Elle a savant. Elle is a genius in deduction, according to some of the novel. At 8 years old, around the time when he entered Whammy's house, Elle proved to be a genius by exhibiting his analytical and intellectual skills, by doing things ranging from completing puzzles to successfully investing in stock. At the age of 8, he was smart enough to stop the outbreak of World War III at the time of the Winchester Mad bombing by stopping them. Elle doesn't just have an extremely high IQ, probably reaching around 200. He has shown his abilities through his cases. I think it's safe to say that Elle is extremely bright, pretty much savant-like. Moreover, I'd say that there's a few similar instances of Elle showing signs of unique Asperger's behaviors with some observations. A scene worthy of note is Elle's tennis game with Light and how good he was, champion level, yet we don't hear of Elle taking part in any team sports. I think it could be the obsession that drives him to do so well. The same logic can be applied to his deductions, to the extent that he gets depressed from not being able to prove that Light was Kira. Interestingly, people with Asperger's are more prone to depression and anxiety, due to potentially the flat effect, not showing emotion, which makes them seem down. So I suppose from maybe observations, people don't take into account the fact that they don't show much emotion, maybe assuming that they're more depressed than they actually are. Now, I believe that there is a quality about Elle which is pretty iconic, which could be attributed to his potential condition, and that is the way that he sits. Throughout the series, Elle is known to sit even on a chair with his knees close to his chest, typically with his thumb on his lip. Pretty much like the way I'm sitting right now. This is not intentional. I just kind of noted this now while I was speaking. Elle's kind of like a bit more like that though, so I'm not completely the same. Light actually points this out, and Elle is pretty aware of it, saying,
"Out of the way here, no one's gonna give you a hard time about the way you sit."
I don't sit like this because I want to. I have to sit like this.
In this show, there is no real explanation for why Elle sits the way he does. The only reason given is what he stated. If he doesn't sit like that,
my deductive skills would immediately be reduced by roughly 40%.
I've looked online to find any research which supports the idea that Elle's sitting posture actually increases cognitive abilities, and I found one thing. Supposedly there is a slightly significant correlation between the sitting position and blood flow to the brain. Blood flow is more restricted to other parts of the body, thus more is sent to the brain, theoretically leading to an increase in intelligence, but I suppose it's a bit muddy. So personally, I think that this is a unique quirk Elle developed as a result of potentially having Asperger's and any type of high-functioning autism.
It's been ringing non-stop all day. I find it very distracting. I wonder if it's a church, maybe a wedding, or perhaps
What are you getting at, Ryuzaki? Come on, cut it out. Let's get back inside.
I'm sorry. Nothing I say makes any sense anyway. If I were you, I wouldn't believe any of it.
Overall, from the short amount of time that passes during Elle's screen time on Death Note and what little details we know about his personal life, I'd say it's pretty hard to fully say that Elle has Asperger's syndrome. On the other hand though, from what we do know about him and what we can infer, there is a lot of strong evidence to provide the case that he does have Asperger's. His social isolation, lack of friends, coupled with the behaviors he exhibits in regards to his non-verbal and verbal behaviors, bear a striking resemblance to someone that has Asperger's. Not only this, but Elle has savant-like intelligence in regards to his logistical and deductive reasoning skills, which is related to high-functioning autism. This is made very clear when Elle is able to suspect that Light is Kira after a few short weeks. He only lacked the sufficient amount of evidence to arrest him. Unfortunately, his genius borders on unhealthy compulsion. If this wasn't the case, I'd be less likely to believe that Elle had Asperger's, but here is another clear sign. Other repetitive behaviors like eating sugary food, sitting in an awkward manner are characteristic of someone having the condition. This video was made to explore the extent to which Elle could have Asperger's syndrome, and in my opinion, I would say that he does. What do you guys think? Do you have anything that we can add to the discussion? Is there anything that I missed out? Thank you for watching my breakdown of Elle. I hope you enjoyed. It took a little while to write and make, but again, as usual, good fun. More on the way, as per usual, and I've been Sir Lance, and have a great day.
Motherfucking fate, it's open season. for the kill. Adrenaline pumping through my veins, now I'm feeling the thrill. Call me Itachi, you won't see me. Tsukuyomi.